Connor Bedard scores in the opening 30 seconds, but that's about all that went right for the Chicago Blackhawks in their 8-1 loss to the Arizona Coyotes. I'll talk about what went wrong for the Blackhawks, as well as Lukas Reichel's continued struggles, and also provide the latest updates that we have on defenseman Kevin Korchinski's future. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? Welcome on in to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you all for making the show your very first listen. Here to start off your day, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Go and give me a follow on X at JackBushman2, or you can check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And also, just a quick reminder per usual, please go and help your boy out. Go and show some support real quick. If you haven't done so already, that means smash that like button, comment down below as well. And of course, subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. It won't cost you anything. It's 100% free, and it really does go a long way. So please, please, please make sure to go and do that. And you can also go and turn on the push notifications to get notified when the episode's uploaded each and every day. And today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks is sponsored by Game Time. Go and download the Game Time app right now and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for $20 off to the sporting events, concerts, or theater events near you. All right, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on when you're listening to this. Thank you all again for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. You guys smell something? You know what that is? Oh, I know what it is. It's the absolute stinker of a performance the Chicago Blackhawks put up in the desert on Monday night, taking on the Arizona Coyotes as they give up a touchdown and the 2-point conversion and wind up dropping this one 8-1, undoubtedly their worst performance of the opening 9 games this season. And that drops them down to 3-6-0, where they have the next 5 days off before their next meeting with the Florida Panthers. But yeah, just simply one to forget for the Chicago Blackhawks. My, oh my, it's honestly hard to put into words how pitiful and how putrid this performance was. And it's especially disappointing when you remember the game before this, when the Blackhawks were out in Las Vegas. They get off to a pretty shoddy first 10 minutes and fall behind 2-0, but really go on to rally together and pick up just a gutsy win to hand the Golden Knights their first loss of the season. And it really felt like that could have been a potential turning point for the Blackhawks here in the early going. Not that, it had been downright terrible. I think a 3-5-0 start through their first 8 games, given the schedule they were going up against, was pretty good, but there still were some things they needed to clean up. And we heard Luke Richardson talk about that with the media. That led to a very hard fought and intense practice before going out to Vegas. And I was really hoping that the effort level and what it took to come back against that Golden Knights bunch, that's obviously the defending Stanley Cup champions, was really going to ingrain into the Blackhawks' minds what it takes in order to be successful in this league night in and night out. And that just couldn't be further from the case to what happened on Monday night, because it almost looked like the Blackhawks, I don't know, maybe they didn't expect the Arizona Coyotes to go out there and do what they did, but it just felt like they didn't have any answers. It was defensively a nightmare, breakdown after breakdown, bad positioning, bad turnovers, bad coverage. In an 8-1 loss, it's clearly hard to find positive takeaways from this one. So definitely disappointing that the Blackhawks were not able to not only build off of the victory that they had in Vegas, but to go on and have their worst loss of the season. Yeah, it was a tough pill to swallow, especially for all the Blackhawks fans out there, along with myself, that stayed up until, 12-1 in the morning to watch this game. I wouldn't blame anyone for going to sleep early, but for a 9-10 puck drop, the Blackhawks sure didn't do their fans any favors here. And in terms of what went wrong, why did this happen? It felt like it was just kind of a snowball effect. It really was a weird game in its own right, because yes, the Blackhawks played horrible, but I also don't think they played as terrible as the 8-1 loss shows. There was a couple of bad bounces that didn't go their way. They did definitely deserve to be the losing team, but it felt like it was just one of those nights where it got out of control early and there just was no stopping it. It was just pretty clear it wasn't the Blackhawks night. But what stunk about it even more was it got off to a roaring start. Just 28 seconds into the game, Kevin Korchinski makes a magnificent feed, an absolute rocket of a pass, cross seam to find Connor Bedard. He goes top shelf for his fourth goal of the season, third in the last 4 games. The kid is really starting to get it going here. And, with this being the first matchup of what could be many battles between Connor Bedard and Logan Cooley, highly regarded as the top 2 prospects in the NHL at this point in time. Connor Bedard, I'm sure, had heard some of the whispers out there about Logan Cooley being ranked higher in some folks' minds. And even the Arizona Coyotes put out kind of a bold statement over the summer claiming that Logan Cooley was the top prospect in the world. I feel like Connor Bedard would have had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder heading into this one, and he made his presence felt there early. But that was about the only thing that went right for the Chicago Blackhawks. They did, after that goal, kind of have a lot of good offensive zone time and were moving the puck well. It wound up being 3-1 Coyotes after the first period, but it felt like the Blackhawks easily could have had that lead. Like, it really wasn't a terrible first period despite giving up 3 goals. But then in the second, that snowball effect just kind of happened. And the defense couldn't find a way to stop the bleeding. Arvid Soderblom also didn't have his best night in particular in net. And this game was the one where, out of all of his starts, including the preseason, and this has been something I've talked about seemingly each and every episode after one of his outings, he just looks a little bit scrambly in net. That had been the case through his first 4, 5, 6 starts, whatever it may be, including the preseason, but he was still finding ways to get the job done. That didn't happen on Monday in Arizona. It was one that's really going to hurt his save percentage moving forward. I believe he stopped 15 of the 21 or 22 shots on goal that he faced. Wound up getting pulled kind of at an awkward point in the game, and Luke Richardson went on to say the reason he didn't pull him earlier is because he wanted to give Mrazek the proper time to warm up, given all the history he has with groin issues, which does make sense as well. But poor Soderblom got hung out to dry there. He wasn't good, but the defense in front of him wasn't good either. I mean, I could name instances of with all 6 defensemen. None of them played well. It was not a pretty performance for the Blackhawks defense. Didn't do their goaltender any favors, and he didn't have his best night in that either. So, yeah, an absolute stinker for the Chicago Blackhawks here in the desert. One that was certainly disappointing, but I did think it was a bit interesting to hear Nick Foligno's perspective as one of the veteran leaders in the Blackhawks locker room. He was speaking with the media after the game, and what he had to say I thought was a little bit interesting, but something I hope is true and really does resonate with this young group that the Blackhawks have right now. Foligno said, quote, "This is going to be really weird to say this, but maybe it's a good thing that loss happens and we have 5 days to chew on it, because I hope our team understands how you have to respect this league. It's a bad feeling in here because we're talking about trying to grow this. That was a perfect example of not anywhere close to what we're trying to do." And as I mentioned earlier, the Blackhawks have 5 days off before their next game, which is Saturday back at the United Center against the Florida Panthers. Yours truly will be in attendance that night. But I think this is a good reminder and hopefully something. I was hoping that the work ethic and the fight and what it took to beat Vegas on Friday last week was going to resonate with the Blackhawks moving forward. Clearly it didn't. Hopefully this 8-1 loss was a rude awakening and was a message that they received, because as Foligno said, if you don't respect the NHL day in and day out, if you don't respect every single team, you could wind up getting embarrassed like they did on Monday night. And the Blackhawks aren't in any position to be sleeping on teams. And it felt like even Seth Jones mentioned that's kind of what happened in this one against the Arizona Coyotes. And funny enough, I talked about one of my keys to victory being you got to shut down the Keller and Schmaltz duo. They had been so good in the Coyotes' 3 wins prior to Monday night. They didn't even wind up on the stat sheet. It was the depth guys who did a lot of the work for the Coyotes. McBain had 4 points. Carconi had a hat trick. A lot of their depth pieces were the ones that really killed the Blackhawks. And maybe it was just a case of the Hawks not expecting them to do that. I don't know what caused it, but I think this is something that should resonate with the Blackhawks. If they're not trying to bring their A game or thinking a team is going to, take it easy on them just because they're another bottom feeder, they're in for a rude awakening. And with 5 days off, I hope they're chomping at the bit to get back out there and prove that they're a much better team than they were on Monday night. So hopefully, that's something that is just kind of a tough learning lesson throughout the course of the season. There's going to be plenty of those along the way, but I've said this time in and time out on this podcast. It's not about those moments. It's about learning how to bounce back from those throughout the course of an 82 game campaign, because there's going to be up and downs. That's just, hockey. That's just the nature of the beast. But it's about the resiliency and how you get up and how you respond to that. And that's really what this young group and these young players need to learn this season. And that's why you bring in veterans like Nick Foligno, Corey Perry, and Taylor Hall to help them understand that and to help guide them along the way. All right, there are my thoughts from the Blackhawks' putrid 8-1 loss to the Coyotes at Mullett Arena on Monday night. Coming up in just a moment here, I'll talk about how Lukas Reichel's struggles also continued as he's now gone 9 games to begin the season without recording a point. But first, I need to talk to you all about Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. And Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And I personally have used Game Time since I was back in high school, probably close to a decade now, which really does make me feel old. But I remember 17, 18-year-old me using Game Time to go to Blackhawks games back in the heyday, the glory days of Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves. I've also used Game Time whenever I'm traveling. I've used it in St. Louis to go see the Cubs take on the Arizona Cardinals. I've always found it's both the fastest and the easiest way for me to purchase all of my tickets. And I also love how they have views from all the seats in the venue so that you know exactly what you get when you arrive. I highly recommend you all go and download the Game Time app right now. And if you create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL, then you'll get $20 off with your first purchase. Again, you can go and get $20 off to see Connor Bedard at the United Center this season. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, use the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, and you'll be getting $20 off. Last minute ticket deals, lowest price guaranteed. Game Time. All right, segment 2. Not only did the Chicago Blackhawks get absolutely pulverized on Monday night to the hands of the Arizona Coyotes, but 21-year-old forward Lukas Reichel had his point drought continue another game, and that makes 9 straight to kick off the 2023-2024 campaign, in which Lukas Reichel has not found his way on the stat sheet. And yeah, he has had his share of opportunities and he's had his chances, but make no mistake about it, he hasn't been even close to the type of the player we were expecting him to be out of the gate, because quite frankly, in the preseason and in training camp, he was absolutely buzzing around. He was looking electric. And I said this going into the season, I didn't think it would be crazy for Lukas Reichel to be the best player for the Blackhawks this season, given I had an idea it was probably going to be him, Connor Bedard, or Seth Jones. And I just, given that Reichel has the NHL experience edge, albeit not much NHL experience, but especially because how well his last stint went, I figured him getting over that hurdle at the end of last season was really going to set him up to do big things right from the get-go. And that just hasn't happened so far this season. And I said a week ago, I was giving Reichel some slack through the early going because, the underlying numbers suggested the goals were going to come soon. But I did say, if he goes the first 10 games of the year without recording a point, then I think you got to start getting concerned, and you got to wonder how much longer he's going to last at the center position on the second line. And here we are. Lukas Reichel has now gone 9 games in a row without a point. And look, I don't think Luke Richardson and the Blackhawks need to completely punt on him being a long-term center. But at this point in time, I think you just have to move him up to the top line to give the kid some confidence. I'm sure, rattled that he hasn't found a way to impact any of the first 9 games here so far. I think just for the kid's confidence sake, you move him up to the top line with Connor Bedard and on the top power play unit, because right now, down the middle, yeah, he's had looks. Yes, he's had some opportunities, but he's just not getting it done. And when you go and think about what happened last year, all of his success was found on the wing when he was skating alongside Andreas Athanasiou in those final, 15, 16, 17 games of the season. He's never found success at the NHL level as a center, not in his first couple of stints, not so far this season. And again, I think just to get him in a positive mindset, you got to go and give him that opportunity. And it just feels like, especially with the Blackhawks offense, in their losses, they've struggled this season. I think you have to go in, put those two together, given that Lukas Reichel, especially with Taylor Hall out, is one of the few guys who has the upside to stick around with Connor Bedard and to be able to play alongside him. So I feel like at this point in time, it's just something that has to be tried, because it clearly isn't working for Lukas Reichel at this point in time. And I thought it was really interesting. Mario Tirabassi from CHGO Blackhawks put out an interesting tweet following the Blackhawks loss to the Coyotes of where Reichel ranks among 14 Hawks forwards with more than 30 minutes at 5-on-5 this season. In terms of time on ice, he's third. So there have been some games where Luke Richardson's kind of held back on him in the first period mostly, but he still has the third most time on ice at 5-on-5 among all Blackhawks forwards. But in terms of Corsi for percentage, which means shot attempts for to shot attempts against, he ranks 14th, dead last. Shot attempts, or shots on goal for, he ranks 14th, dead last. He's been on the ice for no goals for to 7 against. Not only does he not have a point, he hasn't been on the ice for a goal for in 9 games at 5-on-5 compared to 7 against. That's 14th among 14 forwards. The expected goals for percentage is 12th. The scoring chance percentage is 14th. High danger chance percentage is 7th. Like I said, he's been getting some looks. He's just been mostly shooting them right in the opposing goalie's breadbasket. I don't know what more needs to be said or what more needs to be seen for Coach Luke Richardson to just kind of mix things up. And again, Lukas Reichel is still only 21 years old, and this move doesn't have to be permanent. We can still move Lukas Reichel down the middle. And the tough part about it too is he has been the Blackhawks' best center iceman here in the early going. And that's not saying all that much. The Blackhawks are the worst face-off team in the NHL right now, but he's one of the few guys who's shown he's been able to win draws. He's 51.3% at the dot this year. So that kind of has to go into account as well. I get it if I'm Luke Richardson, but I think you just have to handle this kid's confidence, and you know the situation and the thoughts that have to be going through his head right now. And I'm sure he's asking himself why it has been going so bad. You don't want that to keep progressing, and 9 games is long enough. I think it's time to give Lukas Reichel that opportunity. That's where he's found success at the NHL level. It has not been down the middle. Again, I don't think it has to be permanent, but I do really think Luke Richardson in the next 2 games, if not Saturday against the Florida Panthers, I absolutely think Lukas Reichel has to at least get some shifts during that game, along with Connor Bedard on the Blackhawks top line. All right, Blackhawks fans, coming up in just a moment here, I will finally get into some good news on today's episode, as I'll talk about the latest updates we have on defenseman Kevin Korchinski's future. But first, I need to talk to you all about FanDuel. Football season is underway, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you go and bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every single time that they win in the regular season. All you have to do is go and pick a Super Bowl winner, and you'll get a bunch of bonus bets for every single regular season victory. And you can use these bonus bets to bet on anything from the money line to point spreads, over-unders, and even player props. And FanDuel is the best app because I love how it's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And when I win, they pay me out instantly. So make sure to go and sign up with FanDuel today. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you can start earning bonus bets right now with America's #1 sportsbook. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, please make sure to go and smash that like button. Comment down below as to what you think the Blackhawks top line should be when they take on the Florida Panthers this Saturday. And please go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube if you're not already. I'm really trying to boost those numbers up right now, and I would greatly appreciate all of your support. And if you're wanting more Blackhawks related content or clips right here from the show, you can also go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram as well. All right, segment 3. Let's talk about some good news for the first time on today's episode. I think that's much needed. Prior to Monday's game against the Arizona Coyotes, Blackhawks head coach Luke Richardson talked with the media and was asked about Kevin Korchinski's future as the 10-game threshold is looming, where Korchinski is going to burn off the first year of his entry-level contract if he plays in that 10th NHL game, which, you know, we knew that was going to be part of the Blackhawks plan one way or the other, but it was, of course, interesting to hear Richardson say it's, quote, safe to assume that Korchinski is going to be sticking around past that 10-game threshold. And as I was just getting into, we expected that to be the case, whether he was going to go back to Seattle or whether he is going to stick around with the Blackhawks. That first year of the entry-level deal, Kyle Davidson, something he's wanted to do since taking over is clearly get those young guys through that ELC to get them to a cheap sort of bridge deal as soon as possible. So that's why they're trying to accelerate this process with Kevin Korchinski. And while Richardson saying, you know, it's safe to assume Korchinski is going to stick around past that, that doesn't officially mean that he's going to be sticking around in the NHL long term. But I will say, Richardson saying that to the media, I mean, I really don't think he would have said that unless he had a pretty good idea that the decision had already been made. And in my opinion, and I think in most Blackhawks fans' opinion, I feel we all feel the same way about this, at least based on what I've seen on social media thus far. I think we all kind of feel like Kevin Korchinski is deserving of sticking around for the rest of the year. And this is something that I have gone back and forth with over the last several months when discussing this topic. And I do ultimately think there are positives with both options. But what it comes down to for me is Korchinski just looks ready to be an everyday NHLer. And given the role that he's been in through these first 9 games inside the Blackhawks top 4 for all 9 of them, some of it spent with Connor Murphy on the second defensive pairing, most recently, along with Seth Jones on the top D pairing. And he's handled his own. Has there been struggles? Has he been still, you know, trying to figure things out on the fly at 19 years old against grown men? Yes, absolutely. And the hiccups that he's sustained, I guess you could say, so far, that's to be expected. That's all part of the learning curve for a young defenseman at this level. But I still think it's been pretty clear that Korchinski's been one of the Blackhawks' top 4 defensemen through these first 9 games. I think it's pretty clear that he's been better than Wyatt Kaiser so far and has been more reliable than both Jared Tenorti and Nikita Zaitsev. I think they're both far more bigger liabilities than Korchinski is at this point. I think he has been one of the Blackhawks' top 4 defensemen. I know there have been bumps in the road, didn't have a good game against the Coyotes, but no one on the Blackhawks D-corps did. And I still think his abilities are going to help this Blackhawks blue line more than maybe some of his weaknesses in the defensive zone are going to hurt them. And I just think they have bigger issues with their blue line right now, like whether Wyatt Kaiser is ready for the NHL level night in and night out at this point. He's kind of gone through some of his own consistency issues in the early going. You got to figure out what is going to happen with Zaitsev and Tinordi. They still don't really seem to be sold on who's the one they want in the lineup, although Tinordi seems to have the advantage. But I'd still be far more trusting with Korchinski in basically any situation than I would over either of those two or Wyatt Kaiser at this point. So to me, I think keeping Korchinski around, assuming that is going to be the decision here, I think it's the right one. I think this kid has shown that he's capable and is one of the Blackhawks' best defensemen right here, right now, and you can't take that opportunity away from him. And Richardson spoke to Korchinski along with Kyle Davidson when they told him that he was going to be making the NHL opening night roster. And they told him, this is an opportunity, that you still got to go earn. You got to prove to us that, it's in your hands now. Whatever happens, it's up to you. And I think Kevin Korchinski has been good enough to be given the A-OK by the Blackhawks front office. Again, this isn't official, but I do believe that Luke Richardson hinting that towards the media is a pretty good sign. I like what I've seen from Kevin Korchinski thus far. He's shown us a couple of beautiful flashes of what we hope to see for a long time on the blue line here in Chicago. Not official as of yet, but I do believe Kevin Korchinski is going to be sticking around with the Blackhawks for the rest of the way in the 2023-2024 campaign. All right, folks, that is going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show, and make sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube right now, and go and follow the podcast for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast. And that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and give me a follow on X at JackBushman2, or if you're wanting more Blackhawks news and updates, you can also go and check out my strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. So until tomorrow's episode, that's going to do it here for the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.